So moving to a new country isn't just about learning the language. It's about understanding the culture, the mindset, and how people really communicate. And today's guest is an expert in exactly that. So on today's podcast, we're inviting Anastasia from Berlitz to speak about the importance of learning Greek before you come to Greece. And I want to share a little bit more about Berlitz. So Berlitz is a global leader in language and intercultural education, founded in the US in 1878, which is a very long time ago, you're probably thinking. And they operate in over 70 countries worldwide, which is amazing. They're known for the Berlitz method, which gets people speaking and understanding from day one, with a strong focus on real-life communication and cultural awareness. So Anastasia has been with Berlitz for 8 years. She initially started as a Greek and language teacher, Greek and English teacher, sorry, and now leads the Greek language program and cultural training seminars. She's especially passionate about helping people who move to Greece integrate smoothly, confidently, and authentically through customized cultural programs. So I'd love to pass the microphone to Anastasia and lead in with the first question, which is, from your experience, what are some of the common misconceptions that new expats have about their language needs when they arrive in Greece?
So, hi, Chloe, and thank you for having me. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that everyone speaks English, so I will be fine. Yes, many Greeks speak English, especially younger people or those who work in tourism, but daily life isn't lived in English. Bureaucracy, healthcare, small local shops, or even apartment buildings, they often operate almost entirely in Greek. Another misconception is that learning Greek can wait. Many expats think they will pick the language up eventually, but we have to remember that Greek language is not similar to any other language, any other European language that they might already know. Reading signs, names, or forms can feel intimidating at first. During the first months of a move, this is when habits form. So those who delay, they often feel isolated because of that, or overwhelmed. However, those who approach the language early, they usually adapt much faster, and they are experiencing far less stress.
I think it's everywhere, right? People think, oh, okay, I can just get away with English, but in a lot of cases, it's not the reality. So in the first 6 to 12 months of moving to Greece, what are the top two, if you could name 2 or 3 situations where a lack of Greek can cause an expat the most stress?
The first, as I said before, is bureaucracy, public services, tax offices, banks. Even when staff there can be kind, the terminology is complex. And if you don't understand what's happening, that can be emotionally draining for someone. The second is healthcare. Many expats tell us that the first time they are sick or they need a pharmacy, for example, late at night, this is when they realize how vulnerable it feels not to be able to speak the language or explain, for example, your symptoms. I would say the third, any kind of housing related communication, maintenance, electricians, plumbers. These are situations, even when they are basic, they are high stress. So speaking Greek can make a huge difference. When you have a plumber coming, the chances are that they might speak some English, but not so well. So they can see the problem, they can see what's happening, but setting, for example, or settling the budget, or if something that it requires high maintenance, this can be problematic.
And let's say beyond simple tasks, how does learning basic Greek fundamentally change an expat's experience, let's say when they're buying coffee or they're going shopping or buying a local SIM card, for instance?
It has to do with the emotional impact that speaking in Greek can have. What changes is control and confidence. As with the previous examples, but also buying a SIM card. You can ask follow-up questions. You can understand better your options. These are the moments that shift you from dependence to independence. So you have better control. You're not a passive expat. You're an active resident in Greece. I had a student that told me that the first time they ordered coffee in Greek, it felt like a small victory, but the emotional impact was huge because exactly they felt like they were not just visiting the country, they were participants. They had that sense of belonging eventually.
I think it helps with being confident, right? When you practice it with other people, you become more at ease with the language, and it definitely feels like a reward when you start ordering your coffee in Greek. As in, yeah, for example, I can recall my first experience when I did that, and it felt like a huge win for me.
So if I may add, this kind of small wins, everyday wins, they help you, yes, build your confidence, but also is a motivation. They offer motivation to continue learning the language or being able to have daily transactions. It helps your confidence, it helps your motivation to keep up.
100%. And I think there's so many expressions, right? Like Anastasia, which I learned very early on, which can't be directly translated into English. And I think, for instance, like kuluri is something that's like typically Greek, right? It's not, an English thing. So I guess you also learn a lot about the Greek culture through the language and, how things are done, what to say to people, et cetera, et cetera.
There are many idiomatic expressions, nasta kala, for example, that you mentioned. You can say ευχαριστώ, which is something that you can translate to English, but saying something like that it's more idiomatic, this is when, and Greeks hear you using that expression, this can make a change in how they will interact with you.
Can you name a few examples as to how, let's say, those interactions change? And this leads into like my next question, which is, obviously if somebody sees you try to speak Greek, how does that, open doors, let's say, to integrate better with the culture or open doors to friendship, for instance?
Greek people, they value effort more than saying something in a perfect accent, for example, or not making any mistakes. We see that the moment an expat tries say something in Greek, even if it's something simple or idiomatic, as we said before, even with mistakes, the interaction changes. So Greek people, they slow down, they smile more, they want to explain things. When they see that you want to speak, you have that intention that you want to speak in their language, you want to communicate with them in Greek, Greek people appreciate that, and they have that need to invite more conversation, to explain things better to you. I think the moment you stop as an expat starting conversations in English, this is the moment that you will start making Greek friends as well. It's like a signal to Greek people that the signal that says that I'm here to stay. I'm not just visiting. I respect your culture. So that's how you will become part of the community more easily.
I think Greeks themselves know how difficult of a language it is, and they say it all the time, "Είναι μια γλώσσα πολύ δύσκολη." And I think when, they see an expat actually trying, to speak Greek, they really appreciate it, and you will see their face light up. And I think one of the examples I have in my own life is like when I speak to my boyfriend's parents and they see me trying, and, their faces all light up, like they look happy, they ask more questions. Even sometimes I don't understand what they're, saying all of the time. It's, it's a nice interaction. So
Greek people love explaining things and sharing things about their culture, because Greek people are very proud of their culture and the language. So when they see you trying, they want to teach you, let's say, something. And that's how you build a relationship also with them.
I think Greeks are very passionate about their culture and their language and their history. So I think when they see someone else learning their language, they feel very proud.
Yeah.
So I think there's a huge sense of pride, and I think that joy is shared through the language. That not always you don't get that if you're speaking English with somebody. So yeah, that's a perfect example. So the next question is, what role does the ability to communicate in Greek play in an expat's overall well-being?
As I said before, it plays a huge role in mental and emotional health, the overall well-being, as you said. When you cannot express yourself, you can feel frustrated. Or even isolated. I have had experiences moving to other countries that, again, I couldn't express myself so well. So I have had that feeling. I know how it feels. On the other hand, even basic communication can restore the sense of belonging and your confidence, as I said before. So we see that pattern. Expats who learn Greek early, they have higher confidence, as I said, they have less stress, and eventually they have a stronger sense of home, not just living abroad, but this is my home, this is the place, and I can communicate, I can express myself in any situation, or even in simple daily situations.
Yeah, and I think when I started improving my Greek language, for instance, with my boyfriend's parents, it made a huge difference to my level of happiness and sense of community. When I saw them respond to me or welcome me, it just made such a huge. It was almost like a overnight transformation. And it just made me feel so much more like this is my home now, like you said. And obviously there's a barrier, right, that you have to go through when you're learning the language. And I think everybody has that. But once you go through that breakthrough, that barrier, things just naturally just flow better and become easier.
I've had people saying that, and I have felt that as well. It can happen overnight, as you said. It is a feeling. It is that moment that you realize, I'm not alone. I can make friends. I can go to the supermarket and speak in Greek, and this is again part of my daily life. I'm not just someone that is seen as a stranger, as a foreigner. I want to become, I am a part, or I'm becoming a part of this community. So you don't have that feeling of loneliness, of feeling alone. And it's a huge psychological shift. It makes a difference.
And in terms of if an expat is planning a move, let's say in the next 6 to 12 months, what level of Greek should they aim to master before they land?
I would say ideally they should at least aim for an A2 level of Greek. At an A2 level, you're not fluent, but you're functionally independent in everyday life. So by a complete A1 or at the beginning of an A2 level, let's say, you should be able to introduce yourself, talk about who you are or why you moved to Greece, order food, shop, ask for directions, understand simple instructions, and handle everyday services like pharmacies that we mentioned before, manage basic conversations, everyday, daily routines, let's say. The important thing is that, as I said, you can initiate conversations at an everyday level, okay? So you don't just respond to questions that they might ask you. You want to be able to initiate conversations. And again, that takes us to what we were saying before, that you're becoming part of the community exactly because you're able to at least initiate and carry on for some time some conversations. That's it. That makes a huge difference from feeling able, capable, not just dependent on your mobile, for example, translating things or uh, speaking in English, of course.
How long would you say on average would it take to get to an A2 level? And also I know that, a lot of people are intimidated by the alphabet because it's an entirely new alphabet. So can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of the timeline?
It has to do, I think, with the lessons that someone will have. For example, if someone insists so much or places more focus, let's say, on learning the alphabet as it is first, then that can feel intimidating, that can make you feel frustrated because you don't understand. For example, we have 4 or 5 different sounds and letters to correspond to that. And I know how it is. The key is not to place so much emphasis on that. I mean, yes, the alphabet is important and you should learn it, but you can take your time, take a look at the words, and try to, as the time goes by, you will see that you will be able eventually to recognize the words and recognize the sounds that correspond to the letters. I would say that yes, it can feel intimidating, the alphabet, but eventually, if you take a more holistic view of the language and the alphabet itself, you can reach that level faster. To answer the question, the first question, it depends on the intensity of the lessons, how intensive they will be. Obviously, there are courses that can be tailor-made. If, let's say, you're moving to Greece in 3 months, 5 months, or 6 months, you can have a program that is tailored to your needs or your specific deadline. And you can have more intensive courses, you can have more flexible courses. I would say, in order not to rush anything and be able to assimilate the language better, I would say 4 to 6 months to reach an A2 level, I mean.
Yeah, okay. And that is if you do an intensive one.
If you do, for example, lessons twice a week,
Mm-hmm.
which is a good frequency, because okay, you want to I'm guessing we're talking about adults, so obviously they have work, they have other responsibilities. Twice a week, it's good frequency, and you have that kind of contact with the language every week. So I would say twice a week for 4 to 6 months, depending on the person, depending on the way that they work also during the lessons or after the lessons. I would say it would take 4 to 6 months to reach A2 level. As for an intensive course, every day, for example, lessons can be 2 to 3 months, approximately. Again, it depends on the person. If they had experience learning languages before, that's important. Even if the language is completely different, the fact that you have been a student of a foreign language can help you learn faster another language, because you know how to work, you know how to study. So it's much easier for someone that has had that experience of learning other languages.
I think 4 to 6 months, like you said, is a very realistic timeline. In my head, I thought it would be like a year, at least a year or two. So that is really, really nice to hear that, I think that's doable for a lot of people.
As I said, it depends on the situation. So if you are if you're doing a lesson once a week, okay, this is something that, okay, I have a lesson, I have that kind of contact once a week with the language, the lesson. But if you don't work also, because during a lesson we can do so much, after the lesson also there's a time of self-study, that helps you build on what has been taught during the lesson. So we've had, for example, students, expats, that they started the course, but for some reason, because, as I said, okay, we have responsibilities, we're adults, they paused and then they started again over some period of time. That can lead to a year, as you said. So it depends on how concentrated you are, how committed you are to learning the language.
As you were saying, it's much faster, let's say, to learn something if you're guided with a teacher, a professional, rather than doing it yourself, correct?
I know from my experience as a student of foreign languages, but also from my experience as a teacher, I've had many students that came to me, having used an application, for example, on their a mobile app for a long time. And yes, I could see that they could recognize the words, but they couldn't use them. Just relying on an application, or I don't know, getting a vocabulary list and trying to learn it by heart, it would actually have it would have a negative effect, I think, because it would make you feel more frustrated. I'm spending so much time on the app, I'm spending so much time memorizing all these words, but I cannot speak after a long time. So you feel more frustrated, you feel demotivated, and that's when you stop learning. You lose your motivation, you lose your confidence also. It feels frustrating. So I think that what we said before about the alphabet, for example, these kind of apps, they are good if you want to familiarize yourself with the alphabet or the sounds at the beginning, but you need the lessons to be able to speak, to function in the language. But not only that, there is the cultural part of the language as well, that you cannot learn if you don't have a teacher, some kind of teaching experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And I think one of those apps, I don't know if they were using the app, but I use Duolingo. And at the beginning, I was learning words like arcuda, like there. And it's not like something you would use in daily language, right?
Exactly. It depends. It depends on where you live, but in Greece, but yes, or what you do. I mean, yeah, that's one of the most yes, I was talking about Duolingo, but there are other apps as well. But this is what a very good example what you said. I mean, you can learn, you can recognize, or you can learn a word that's a C1 level word, let's say, συνειδητοποιώ, okay, which is a difficult one. Realize sounds easier in English, but okay, you don't know how to order coffee, for example. Why should you learn a more difficult, more advanced vocabulary first if you cannot use simple vocabulary in a sentence? What good would it make? It's a waste of time, and that's why it feels demotivating.
I think you mentioned not to start with the alphabet, right? You mentioned to start speaking
from day one. This is what we do also at Berlitz. As you mentioned in the beginning, this is the Berlitz method. You start speaking in the target language from day one. It depends again on the student, but I usually don't teach the alphabet letter after letter, sound after sound. You can teach the sound system, yes, by looking at vocabulary, yes, but the very, very first lesson that we have, it's a lesson where we teach our students daily basic expressions. For example, me lene Anastasia, my name is Anastasia, or Kalimera Tikanis, good morning, how are you? We teach these expressions from day one, not having seen the alphabet. So eventually, they will recognize the alphabet, they will recognize the sounds, but first they would have learned some basic expressions to conduct daily transactions, and that would make them feel more confident. I can speak, I can say something in that language. So feeling confident, they will feel more motivated, so they want to keep on learning, keep on improving, becoming more fluent, and then again more confident. It's like a cycle. So we start straight away from teaching expressions, speaking in the language, and that's a thing that I want to suggest. Speaking based learning, not just memorizing lists. I mean, in Greek also we conjugate verbs, which is different to English. And I've had a student that came to us, and he had before coming to Berlitz, he had lessons with another teacher, private tutoring, and he told me that in the beginning they used to give me these long lists, so I had to memorize how to conjugate all the verbs, a lot of verbs. And I could see, and he told me that he was sort of traumatized because of that. Greek can feel intimidating if you take such a look on grammar, for example. However, it doesn't have to be like that. So this person started having the lessons, he started memorizing, conjugating verbs. He couldn't speak. He didn't speak during the lesson. So he felt demotivated and he stopped having lessons. He thought that Greek language was not for him, for example. He continued trying to speak in English and communicate in English with Greek people. Eventually, when he came to Berlitz, after researching his options and seeing what we can do. When we started having the lesson, he could see that it was completely different than a more traditional, let's say, approach to learning. So speaking from day one is very important. It can help you build that kind of confidence that we were talking about before. So much so that speaking in real life situations, giving your students we give our students the context of real life scenarios. So for example, okay, we are going to learn about the vocabulary, the expressions of ordering something at a cafe, at a restaurant. So they see the language through a real life scenario. We have to contextualize the language. Otherwise, it's just words that don't make sense, or I cannot use them.
As a language learner myself, and I have a bachelor's degree in languages, I think I 100% agree with you on everything you said there. I think context is so important and will actually help you memorize and learn the words when you're put in those situations and those circumstances. You're not just learning random words on a textbook that you'll never use. And I think that's the biggest limitation when it comes to learning and mastering a language. And like you said, the reward system is super important. Like if you don't feel rewarded, you're not going to want to learn. You're going to be discouraged. You're going to be demotivated. And a huge win is when you start speaking it with other people and they understand you. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm communicating in Greek and people will understand me and I can make conversation. And that's like this building that reward system of like, yes, I can converse in a foreign language. That's a huge win for a lot of people. And I think will encourage them to learn more.
Exactly.
There's something else I wanted to mention there. Yeah, not to ramble, but it took me 2 years to go on a Greek class after being here because I was so intimidated, right, by the language. And I think the major thing is the alphabet. And I wish I started, speaking a lot sooner. Or if somebody told me, oh, you can start speaking, we'll just teach you, how to say, basic expressions or things, I would have learned, I think, started much sooner because I think learning the alphabet, definitely delayed my language learning. So that's really important. So for basic, let's say, learners or absolute beginners, what are 2 to 3 highly effective practical learning resources or methods you recommend for somebody wanting to learn Greek to build a solid foundation?
I think the most important is speaking-based learning. It is essential. As you said, learning some words without being able to use them in your context, in your own context, it doesn't mean anything. So they should opt for a method that prioritizes speaking from the very first lesson, as I said. So that can help them build their confidence. They will feel more motivated. They will speak more. They want to learn more. So again, that leads to confidence. And another thing which is very important is real life use. As I said, learning the language through real life scenarios. You said before you learned one of the first words that you learned is the word arkuda, bear. Okay, but in your situation, in your circumstances, you wouldn't use it so often, I guess. But what you would need in the beginning is being able to ask for directions, introducing yourself, talk about your job, these kind of scenarios. This is actually how we start. As I said before, in the very first lesson at Berlitz, we start with introducing yourself, in Greek, I mean, giving the expressions and using them. So from the very first lesson, you're able to have a short conversation, introduce yourself, say what you do, your job, where you're from, where you live now. All this is in the first lesson. And again, this is contextualized. This is a real life situation. And that's how you learn the language. That's how you acquire the language, actually, not just learn it. You just not memorizing isolated vocabulary lists. And since I mentioned context, another important thing is what I mentioned before. Language is not just words, it's the whole culture. So the cultural context is important. Understanding how Greeks communicate, the tone, the body language is just as important as learning what they say, what they mean. This is what we try to do also, what we do at Berlitz. We teach the language, yes, but the culture as well from day one. You cannot really understand, or you cannot really feel part of the community, of Greek community, if you don't understand why, or they are saying what Greeks say, what they say, or how they communicate, gestures or body language. And this is not another part of language learning. At Berlitz, we teach culture in combination with teaching the language, teaching the expressions and the words. It's part of the language, it's part of the culture and language, it's one. So they are taught together, and that can lead to better performance from students, and can build real confidence, as I said.
What advice can you offer to keep motivation high during the frustrations of learning the language? I know we talked about this slightly before, but if you could elaborate on that, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Frustration is part of the of the process, and we have to understand that. We have to accept that. That's why I mentioned before that if someone has experience learning other foreign languages, for example, or learning anything, to be honest, if this is we have to be aware of that. Learning is not linear. Language learning is not linear. Some weeks you will feel very confident, especially after you've mastered some expressions and you go out in real life and you use them. Other weeks you might feel stuck. You will hear something that you won't understand, or see a sign, and again not being able to read it on the spot, for example. That happens. That's part of the process. We encourage, as I said, we encourage our learners to celebrate small wins. As I said before, ordering a cup of coffee, saying something idiomatic to your Greek friends, understanding a joke, which is part of the culture that we were talking about before. If you celebrate these moments, this can really have a positive impact on your learning, so you can overcome the frustration. It can help you feel motivated to keep on speaking, keep on trying. And again, as I said before, just to feel more relaxed. Greeks don't care if you make a mistake. They are so happy. They appreciate so much if they see someone trying. We don't want you to be perfect or speaking with a Greek accent, or even sometimes a lot of speakers of English, they tend to mispronounce the different E So, for example, when we have Omicron and Iota together, it's pronounced E. In Greek, lots of expats in the beginning, they pronounce Oi. They see, but they see, so they pronounce it like that. Greeks will understand. They will understand, even if you mispronounce something. So don't worry so much. That's what I would have to say. And as I said, speaking in Greek, even making mistakes, it's far more important and will open more doors to you than speaking in English. And I can understand that you might feel frustrated, especially in the beginning. It's a lot of information, a lot of differences in Greek language compared to others. But as I said, it's part of the process. If you don't make the mistakes, you won't learn eventually.
Yeah, that's a big part of learning a language, right? Learning as you go, and you learn by making mistakes. I think that's a huge thing. So yeah, we've arrived at the end. I have one last question to ask you, Anastasia, but I really enjoyed this interview. So thank you so much again for your insights. If you could leave future expats with just one piece of advice regarding the Greek language, what would it be?
It's been obvious from our talk. Don't wait. Don't wait to feel ready. Start speaking. Start speaking early. Speak imperfectly. It doesn't matter. Speak often. Speak a lot. Speak early. This will help you unlock that sense of frustration. That sense that I feel isolated. I feel intimidated. So you have to speak. Go out and try out a new phrase that you've heard or learned in your lessons. Don't wait to feel ready. I know how it feels, and I know that sometimes exactly because we are adults and we want to we want to be perfect, let's say, before we speak. That won't work. It will only delay your progress. And start using Greek from day one will help you belong, as I said. And after all, that's what I think that's what expat wants. When they move to Greece, they move to Greece for a reason. So eventually and ultimately, they want to feel part. They want to be part of the community. So speaking, even by making mistakes, will help you belong. And that's the difference.
100%, 100%. Well, thank you so much, Anastasia, for being on the podcast. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights. So you guys, if you want to get in touch with Anastasia, you can fill out a contact form on our website by going on to www.mygreekexpatjourney.com. I'll link below everything in the description box, or send us an email. Our email is info@mygreekexpatjourney, Expat Journey, EXPAT. Yeah, you know what to do. I'll put all the information, but hope you guys enjoyed that. Thank you so much, Anastasia, and see you in the next episode.